Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's masterclass. So if you missed our previous sessions, we've held a series of virtual sessions, masterclasses, roundtables throughout 2024, and you can access those on the resource page on the Channel Consulting website. On May 22nd, we held our last roundtable session, and we were connecting ideas between Vancouver and Toronto about the federal budget 2024 is really designed with an emphasis on discussion. So please think about how you can contribute to an open dialogue today about what it takes to make rental housing investments happen. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, and I'm really thanking you for joining us for this session today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I'll start off with a land acknowledgement. I'm joining you today from the traditional territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. And after our recent wet weather, I'm certainly noticing the long history of this place in regard to water. My name's Tegan Smith. If I haven't met you before, you can find out more about me on LinkedIn or on my website. But what brings me to this work is my 26 years experience as an urban planner. And I'm fortunate enough to have been recognized last year by the Urban Land Institute for my leadership in the industry. So 2024 is really the year of sharpening pencils. Everyone who is contacting me about investments in rental housing is really looking to sharpen their pencils for the following reasons. Interest rates have put downward pressure on land values. We have major risks around development cost charges. We saw this with the announcement from Metro Vancouver last year around the regional DCC. And in the city of Toronto, we had a recent announcement about unexpected DCCs. We have FCM estimating about $105,000 per unit in infrastructure costs. We've got a global market for talent, which is really impacting Canada's competitiveness that we don't have affordable housing. We've got approvals process timelines that are uncertain. And even with the recent Bill 44, Bill 46, and Bill 47 from the province of BC, and with the federal housing accelerator funds, we're still looking at many years before there's more certainty around approvals processes and more alignment between municipalities. We've got unprecedented immigration levels. We've got urgent needs for social housing, and we have recent announcements from the federal government around capital gains tax increases. So all of these factors are leading folks to phone me and ask me, is my project feasible? We need to take a second look. So here's the common factors that folks are looking at when they're considering the investments that they've made or the investments that they're thinking of making in rental housing. There's the question around location. So looking into the municipal GIS, looking at the infrastructure, looking at the current zoning area plans, et cetera. So really understanding, like, what is this location? Is it as good as it seems? Are there anything that I'm missing? Utility encumbrances, et cetera. The next question really is around financial viability. And so we move quickly from a location assessment to the questions of financial viability. What are cap rates right now? What are the expectations around rental growth rates? What are comparable projects renting for right now? What are the engineering studies saying around infrastructure costs? What are the design and construction costs, including for things like amenities? And what is the land value given the current interest rate environment? What's happening with the appraisal on the land value? What are the tax implications from federal budget 2024? And what legal agreements are needed with the city or with other parties? What does the exit look like on this opportunity? And so financial viability is a piece that, as planners, we don't learn a lot about in planning school, and I'm a planner. We have been in a very privileged position in Canada where we've seen escalation in land values throughout my career of 26 years. And so basically now more than ever, people are really sharpening their pencils and needing to understand whether or not the project is actually going to be economical for a capital investment perspective. And this is a piece that I'm talking about a lot with my colleagues in planning right now as a piece that we really need to tool up on in Canada, is understanding land economics better. Of course, regulatory compliance is a piece that I spend a lot of my career working on and talking about, in terms of, at the same time as financial viability is critical, it's also important for developers. That includes private developers as well as nonprofit and government developers, to really understand that there are no easy sites left. And regulatory compliance means also being extremely candid, radical candor around where it's not possible to be compliant. Okay, so not trying to like squeeze something in and hoping nobody notices, but really being explicit. It's like selling a used car. There's no easy sites left. You know, the tires are kind of worn out. We've done an oil change. We don't really know what's happening with X, Y, or Z. So really being explicit around what you know, what you don't know, and coming forward with a very clear assessment on what compliance and non-compliance looks like, and what are your strategies to overcome non-compliance. And then there's always the issue around the condition of the property. Again, no easy sites left. So understanding, constructability, a contractor's perspective, any challenges around demolition, understanding from a code consultant, any issues in terms of any structures or pieces that need to be maintained. Understanding from an engineering perspective, any of the servicing challenges. Arborists, are there precious trees that are going to really impact the development proposal? Are there alternatives of ways to mitigate around those risks in order to maximize the supply of housing? Are there geotechnical issues that make it difficult to dig deeper, but we still want the rental housing? So what does that mean for parking? And heritage. How do we protect heritage while also unlocking housing supply? How can we be perhaps less precious, but also retain the intention of our heritage values? And also, of course, there's environmental issues. There's environmental soil contamination. There's streams, impacts to fish and fish habitat. So really understanding what the property condition is, and understanding, again, that there's no easy sites left, and that there's costs associated with mitigating all of these issues. In terms of trees, it's going to cost units. In terms of environment, it could cost time or money to mitigate. And so all of those factors are going to impact the financial viability, and also may impact regulatory compliance, and be where we need to be more creative in how to be non-compliant. And then there's always the issue of market demand. So this issue is around really understanding what's happening in the market for rental, and understanding what products are going to be most viable given the dynamics in each of the markets. And that anchors back with location as well. So right now I've got a lot of projects in the Broadway area. There's a lot of folks that are trying to make sense of whether or not they can make the economics work on their projects. Those are really, it's a really difficult time. I have a lot of empathy for a lot of private developers and nonprofit developers who are struggling to make this work. And there's also developers that have some incredibly exciting opportunities, but again, no easy sites left. They may be coloring just a little bit outside the lines. And so we need to consider that we always need to be transparent around what those pieces are, but we still need to bring projects forward. So for a typical Broadway site on a development feasibility study, the first thing we're looking at is whether or not this project is west or east of Vine Street, and whether or not Broadway line funding is in place. Okay, so that's our first question that we're looking at. The second piece that we're looking at is whether or not the project is within the TOA area, and in Broadway, they pretty much are in the TOA area, unless they are, east of Vine. And then we have questions at the provincial level around environmental. So that's where we get into issues of soil, into Water Sustainability Act, Environmental Management Act. And then when we look at the regional perspective, we're really looking to see whether or not this site is identified as general urban or industrial. If it's industrial, it's going to be, of course, much more difficult to pursue any business plan outside of the existing zoning. And so we're looking for that. And just because it's outside of the zoning doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it needs a lot more of a long-term strategy. And also just keeping an eye on those regional DCs. Any business plan that was done over a year ago, you're going to need to hit refresh on the DCC numbers, okay? And then the fourth piece is around the Broadway plan, actually looking at what the Broadway plan says about below market units, around job uses, looking at housing policy, at the family-oriented housing policy, looking at the housing agreement templates, what to expect, looking at what the DCL waiver is going to be requiring, factoring in green building requirements for rezonings, looking at city fees, DCCs, CACs, and making sure that we have a really robust idea of what the offsites could look at, like considering the engineering servicing requirements based on the level of density on the site. So these are the factors that we typically would look at for a Broadway site. So our development feasibility framework is really the spine of everything that we do at Channel Consulting. The feedback that we have is that our framework is the best in BC. There's no one like it. I had the privilege of starting my company just before the pandemic when there was so many transactions happening, and there were a number of very sophisticated groups that were entering the Vancouver market at the time, where I had basically my framework completely vetted by their investment committees. So the framework that we have today at Channel Consulting, the feedback we consistently get is there's nothing like it out in the market right now. So I'm very proud of that, and I'm very proud of the team of people that I've worked with as we've developed this over the last 5 years. So we're now at the point where we have this incredible framework that are used in 3 different ways. Some developers, again, private developers, sophisticated REITs, insurance companies, pension funds are using it as information to inform their decision-making, getting a third-party opinion to inform decisions, which in some cases involve shelving a project for now, okay? The second option is that groups, a number of families, also very sophisticated groups, engage us to help them to navigate the approvals process. Okay, and we call that our development consulting piece. And then the third option is that we provide capital through Uplift Fund. I'm going to talk now just a little bit about Uplift Fund. So Uplift Fund has been born out of the need. The lack of capital available right now is a problem in terms of generating shovel-ready projects. So basically in this current environment, it's very difficult for developers in all 3 categories that I mentioned to get access to capital. And so we have a group of investors who are interested in exposure to the value add that comes through the permitting process. Okay, so that capital is provided through the pre-development phase. It's an investment in the project approvals process. So city fees, studies, et cetera, design, that will get us to the point of having a conditional rezoning, a shovel-ready project. And then there are sophisticated groups that have a investment criteria that is for building and holding rental housing assets long-term. So Uplift Fund is looking at unlocking mega housing, and we're not looking at multiplex. We're looking at projects that can unlock 100 to 400 housing units. So we're looking at those sites that have a government commitment to a land use plan and investment in rapid transit infrastructure, that have a sophisticated development partner, and that have a parcel size, again, of 100 to 400 housing units are going to work, and that the asset is well positioned for a rental housing operator who's looking to acquire that site. So the purpose of the Uplift Fund is to unlock housing supply in Vancouver and Toronto in transit-oriented locations. So that really is going to conclude my presentation. I also wanted to mention that this is the last session in our virtual series for the first half of 2024. We are going to be having more sessions in the fall, and I'm really curious as to what topics people want to hear about. So please, share in the chat, but also Des is going to send you a link to our feedback form. And if you could send us your feedback and thoughts and suggestions about what topics you'd like to hear, and whether you'd like more of a roundtable, more of a masterclass, more of a discussion, or an Ask Me Anything, we'd love to know more about what you're hoping to hear. So that's enough about that. What I really wanted to do today, as I mentioned, was focus on the discussion. Okay, so what I really wanted to do today is understand, what questions do you have for me? What are the biggest challenges that you're currently facing in developing rental housing in this current environment? And what is it going to take for you to proceed with investments in rental housing? So at that, I'd love to turn it over to all of you. Feel free to turn your camera on, turn your microphones off, and I'd love to hear what feedback you have and what you're hoping to discuss today. So who would like to jump in? Hi, Amir.
Hi, Tegan.
How are you?
Doing great, doing great. I think what you're doing is so important.
Thank you.
Not just on a local level, but on a national level. Just the gross multiplier of any housing project is so significant for communities, even above and beyond the actual housing units. It's such a force for growth that's needed in our economy. And yeah, I just want to commend you for the important work that you're doing.
Thank you.
So you mentioned the Uplift Fund is focused on rental housing, permitting, raw land, specialized or focused for the use of rental housing, sort of 100 to 400 units. With our investment group, we typically don't invest into call funds. We're more versed at doing syndications. So my question to you is this exclusively the only structure you're looking at doing? Of the projects that you're currently underwriting and seeking funding for, can you share more about the specifics of those projects? So the case in point, last week, my family's been in real estate for over 30 years. We are looking actively for investment opportunities. We're looking for acquisitions. We're writing offers ourselves. One of my dad's friends at the gym pitched him on a rental building that they're building. And, I said, great, I don't have to develop it for you, Dad. And someone else can do all the work. Let's see their pro forma. And so it's such, and it's the same when we have investors that want to invest into our projects or partners. And we do, from time to time, do sort of the fund-to-fund approach where we underwrite, we do due diligence. We identify partners such as yourself to raise money for and help syndicate some of the deals. So, again, this deal that was shown to us last week, I looked at the exit cap rate, I looked at the construction cost, I looked at the land value, I dug into it. For example, in the 6 months since they had closed on it, they had marked the land up by 27% in the way that deal was structured, right? And so these are some of the questions that I would have for you. in evaluating whether we want to partner with someone like yourself. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that kind of thinks along these lines. So I thought I would bite the bullet and sort of.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So just like you're looking at different deals and getting into the details and trying to figure out what you can make work. We have looked at several deals over the last 9 months, and we don't have, we were really close on our first investment, and unfortunately I couldn't move forward with it. There were just a couple of questions from investors that we were not satisfied with the answers to those questions. So the IRR that we're looking for is a 20% IRR through to conditional zoning. And that is really to reflect the risk on the costs and the timeline, the entitlement risks, all the risks that we just talked about. And so certainly I sit in a really great place to assess the level of risk, the level of certainty that we have around the approval timeline and cost. That's really what my development feasibilities have been for a number of very sophisticated groups over the last 5 years. So I have a really, really good way of measuring it. However, the question is to find a deal that can actually hit the 20% return rate in the current environment where we're still seeing downward pressure on land values. So it's a difficult time. Having said that, I still believe we could find a deal. And there's a number of reasons why, obviously. I mean, there's historic land values. There's groups that do want to proceed, families and others that do want to proceed with income producing assets that are long-term legacy assets. And so that's really where we're at. I'm planning to proceed on a project by project basis with Uplift Fund. And the reason why is because number one, just the challenge in finding deals right now. Like I'm just not going to have the volume of deals. And the other reason why is just to build out a performance track record that allows the fund to scale. So that's the strategy right now.
Well, Tegan, I appreciate you sharing that. Just to put it out there, my family, we have about 30 years experience on the front end of more the acquisition side of things. We'll typically do the deals that other developers might not look at. Sometimes the hairier ones that require complex land exchanges, nuances, right? Partnering, purchasing lanes, moving property lines.
Yeah.
We have a bit of a reputation in the brokerage community for taking on challenging projects like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, at the end of the day, the number is anywhere between 5 to 6 million doors that we need. So the demand is there.
Absolutely.
And, it's just a matter of finding the right partnerships. And
Exactly.
we have a few opportunities we're still negotiating right now ourselves with existing landowners, looking at partnerships, direct partnerships similar to, I think, what you're proposing. And I just want to take this opportunity to commend what you're doing, this important work that you're doing, and then B, to encourage this conversation. We're here, we're ready, we're willing, we have the capital. We're looking for the right people to work with and the right projects to do. And I heard I'll add this one last line, and I'll press pause and let others speak. But there's anywhere between 8 to 10,000 the equivalent to 8 to 10,000 doors of land in receivership today.
Yeah.
And court-ordered sales are very complex and difficult to do.
Yeah.
We're looking at a couple right now that we're negotiating. And what's interesting with those, and I would welcome an offline conversation, is in one particular instance. So the second mortgagee is underwater. The first mortgagee is control, and they're just looking for someone with capacity and capability to take over. And in that instance, we're looking at a no money deal. So I think there could be a conversation we could have on that one specifically offline if you're interested.
Yeah, let's go ahead and, if you can put my 15-minute calendar in the chat, then she'll send you a link that can be open to everyone in the group. Others, okay, I see a question in the chat. Is the 20% IRR on funds invested up to rezoning entitlement? Yeah, so it's for the investment in uplift fund is just through to the conditional rezoning. Okay, so it's 20% on that piece of the project. Okay, others, what questions do you have? There's got to be more questions because I know people have been looking forward to having a discussion on rental housing. So what problems, what are some of the challenges that your groups are experiencing right now? And feel free to put it in the chat, but also feel free to just turn on your camera and just share your insights, thoughts, comments. Others. We don't have any other folks that are wishing to offer any insights? No? Okay. Okay, well, I would just let everybody know that we have some great videos available on the website around development feasibility. We did a masterclass in April about development feasibility, and Diana Lamb did a piece on financial feasibility. So feel free to rewatch that, to share it with your colleagues. I highly recommend that resource. We did a roundtable federal budget debrief 2024 on May 22nd. Again, we had a lot of presentation, so there's a lot of content there rather than discussion, but feel free to watch that. We do have the free resources. We have our blog that's available on the channelconsulting.ca, which offers weekly, it shows up in your mailbox every week, and it includes some sort of commentary around urban planning principles. And then there's a behind the scenes section where I always include links to things that are happening, really helpful economic updates, policy updates, market studies that have been released. So the subscribership is about 1,700, is close to 1,800 this past week subscribers. And we have an active readership of about 700 folks that are reading it every week. So I certainly encourage you to take a look at that blog and to subscribe to that if you aren't already. And if you have any questions or you'd like to have more of a discussion about how we could help you with the development feasibility study, to number one, glean your own insights about your property development. Number two, to potentially have help in navigating the approvals process during these difficult times. Or number three, to potentially be a candidate for Uplift Fund. By all means, please reach out. Des included a link in here to the 15-minute session. You can go ahead and set something up with me there. And again, if there's any closing questions or comments, I welcome you to please share them. And I look forward to continuing in the fall. And any feedback you have on topics that you'd like to talk more about in the fall, please share. Okay. Oh, I have a question here. Is it safe to assume that the ultimate problem is land value expectations from exiting landowners? No, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is to make the economics work on projects. I think there's a lot of landowners who are of course are going to want to achieve the get what they paid for it. But because of the downward pressure on land values, there are, as Amir mentioned, there are a number of properties that are in receivership at this time, sadly. So I don't think land value expectations are the problem. I think the problems really stem from the costs of building, construction costs, the labor availability problem. We have the problem around infrastructure costs and a lack of certainty. Really, the driver for the problem that we have right now is a lack of certainty in the environment. It's a very difficult time for folks like yourself. If you were going to go ahead and say that you were going to invest some of your savings in a rental housing project, you'd want to know that the economics were going to be viable. And right now, it's very difficult to know if the economics are going to be viable without doing a really, really deep dive and having as much certainty as possible about the costs and the timelines associated with proceeding. Are there any other questions that folks have? You can see that this is a good question, and that it's something, the question of land economics is something that we need to be talking about a lot more in Canada if we're going to be serious about solving the housing crisis. And again, I would direct you toward the masterclass that we did in April with Diana Lamb, where we talked about financial feasibility. And I think it's really important, you know, myself as a planner who didn't have a lot of rigorous training around land economics, that we are really learning and understanding how complex it is and how much risk is involved in actually developing housing. And so having more of an appreciation around what it takes to actually get a project to shovel ready and to get a project built and to open new homes for these new folks who are coming to Canada and to retain talent within Canada, we need homes. And so this is where it becomes really important that we're working in partnership, understanding each other's perspectives, exchanging ideas as much as possible. And that's really my purpose in hosting these sessions. Okay. I'm having problems locating a property for my co-op people. Land costs are too high. Do you think the Bank of Canada interest rate change this month will affect the cost of land? It's a good question. I mean, again, we're talking about how much is the rate going to come down. There's a link in my last newsletter in the behind the scenes section to some really good commentary from Benjamin Tall and also just from Bloomberg News. So you could go and look at Bloomberg News and watch some of those videos from some of the key economists in Canada who provide a really expert perspective on how the Bank of Canada interest rate change will impact land values. Anyone else that has any questions? Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to say last call for questions. And then, of course, you're always welcome to reach out to me with questions and comments. Also, it really helps me to design the content, to know what questions people have, what they're wondering about. So I want to help connect people and ideas to unlock the housing crisis in Canada. And so the more you can share about what you're struggling with, the more I can help be part of that dialogue. I think all of us have a role right now to roll up our sleeves and do things that are a little bit uncomfortable to help unlock the housing crisis. So I would just challenge you to go ahead, share your feedback with us, share your feedback in different forums, get conversations going. And thank you all so much for joining us today for this masterclass. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.